What's up, humans, and welcome to a new Psicoactivo. Okay, so I guess that we have to talk about this because I recently found a new correlation that honestly gave this case just a little bit more credibility or credence. But I guess that nobody's talking about it in the open because it's so out there. So, if you will indulge me at following along with me, back in May 2024. There were a series of events that took place on UFO Twitter, which is the place where coincidentally Jason Sands came out for the first time and told his story. And I know there's a lot of controversy around Jason. There's a lot of people that don't believe him. There's a lot of people that do believe him. And people from both the military and the intelligence community believe his story, the core story. I've spoken to Jeff Nuccitelli. I've spoken to Lenville Logan. I've even spoken to Dr. John Blitch about this. They all say that they believe Jason. Make of that what you will. So at around that time, there were a number of people that were like anonymous that came forward to tell their stories about either experiences they had or alleged contact with NHI that they had. When I heard these stories, honestly, I didn't believe any of it. I still don't. But I do find them really interesting. And I do want to share them with you guys, and you can decide whether you believe it or not. There was one person that came forward that told his story. He used to work with one of these three-letter agencies, and he talks about the ancient gods allegedly coming back and how they're using humans as vessels to communicate messages to the people in power within governments. I don't know if that is true, but I will take you guys through a little summary from this person. His name is Steve. That's how we all got to know him. And then I'll tell you about the connection that I made with another person who also came forward who seems to know Steve. And this person is now part of Skywatcher, and we know who he is. So I'll tell you about him too. But let's see what Steve had to say, just so you guys have an idea of what I'm talking about. Just to clarify, I'm not saying any of this is true. All I'm saying is that there are people within the intelligence community and the military that are coming forward with this type of information, and I don't even know if they believe it's true. They believe what happened to them is true, but the whole story of these ancient gods coming back and all that, I'm not sure they even believe it's true. But they had to share the story because they claim that this actually happened to them, and this ties into a lot of different storylines that are going on right now. Perhaps the most known and familiar to you guys is Chris Bledsoe's story and the story of the lady. And it's about to be Easter 2025. And every Easter, the lady appears to Chris Bledsoe and she relays new information to him, allegedly. This person, Steve, claims that there are more people that are in contact with this lady. And he even told me the name of the lady, the real name, he says, because Chris Bledsoe calls her Hathor. I already did a video on the many representations of this lady throughout history. Link in the description. But he told me the name. The name is it's Baalat, Baalat, ancient deity, chiefly of Byblos. Baalat from West Semitic lady, often used as a synonym for the special goddess of a region. Also, the chief deity of Byblos. Very little is known of Baalat, the Lady of Byblos, but because of the close ties between Byblos and Egypt, she was often represented with a typically Egyptian hairstyle, headdress, and costume. And by the 12th dynasty, between 1991 and 1786 BC, she was equated with the Egyptian goddess Hathor. To the Greeks, Baalat was a form of the goddess Astarte. Yeah. So this lady has been appearing to Chris Bledsoe, has been giving other people prophetic ideas or things that are going to happen. She allegedly relays that information to them, and they either communicate it to the rest of the people or keep it to themselves. I don't know, but this is what Steve said, and I'm gonna leave the link to the Twitter space that he made from last year, so you guys can check it out for yourselves because it is interesting, regardless of whether it's true or not. It is very interesting because it's people within the government and people within the intelligence community that are talking about this semi openly, because this was on a public Twitter space that is still there. And now here's Steve, and I'll let you guys know what he said. The tweet goes, a few people have asked for a high level summary of what was shared with me and my NHI experience. I'm leaving it here for others to consider. I'm fully aware there's a long list of failed predictions throughout history. I'm just sharing what I was told, big if true. The first page is, he says that he was told that two NHI factions are in conflict, a covenant. Unclear if it's between the factions or between the NHI faction and humanity or some combination of the two. The positive NHI faction has been asleep, quote unquote, for a couple thousand years, but they are returning. The negative NHI faction will be visibly exposed in a single moment for all to see, but they will be allowed to leave. Central intelligence wizards are messing with the timeline. Positive NHI do not like this, and this is preventing the awakening. What is the awakening? Humanity's consciousness will be connected telepathically. You will be able to have multiple conversations at once. I don't want that. This collective consciousness will require a karmic balancing. There will be no more secrets, and forgiveness for past wrongs is encouraged or required. This is my best description of what I was told. And then here comes the kicker, guys, because when this was talked about in that space, honestly, that really made me raise my eyebrows, and I nearly just stopped listening to it, to be honest with you. But this is what was told to Steve. Aphrodite, the goddess Aphrodite, will awaken within a U.S. Congresswoman, and she will tell the people what has been happening, and this will be a moment of truth and reconciliation. I was not given a timeline for any of this, though the inclusion of the US Congresswoman would lead me to believe it's at least in her lifetime. Overall, this is a positive series of events that I was told would happen, and 75% of my 36-hour experience dealt with my personal spiritual growth. So it would seem at least one NHI faction is on humanity's side. So this goes way deeper than just trying to find out what UFOs are. I'm sure you're aware. And although I do not entertain hypotheses that have no way of being proven, or at least have some smoke to them, I do think that there is a recent correlation that allowed me to talk about this more openly and with you guys. Because there was another person alongside Steve that came forward not that long ago, and this person goes by the handle Merciful Martin, or Lightbringer on X. And he came forward last year at around the same time Steve did. He also said a lot of really interesting things about human consciousness and about our evolution and about this awakening that is probably going to happen. I didn't know how connected this person was because at the time, honestly, I didn't think Steve was. I thought Steve was probably some kind of a disinformation agent. Maybe that's still the case. I don't know. He's not a bad person. We've had exchanges in the past, and he's really polite. He responds to everything. So I wouldn't say he's a bad person, but it's possible that he's dealing with misinformation that he believes is true, but we don't know for sure. And when Lightbringer came out, I thought the same thing that I thought about Steve. They just felt kind of similar in their approaches. So, to those who don't know, this guy Lightbringer is actually Jordan, the psionic acid from the Skywatcher team, who was interviewed by Alex Klokas in Skywatcher's episode 1.
Jordan, I really appreciate you joining us here today.
Alex, it's an honor to be here, man. Thank you for having me.
So maybe let's start by sharing a little bit about your background.
Yeah. So most recently, I worked in the space technology space, a little bit of data science, ultimately taking different imagery types and trying to solve solutions for the utility industry.
I'm curious, by chance, do you believe that a higher form of non-human intelligence has visited this planet?
I'm certain of that.
You are certain? How certain are you?
100%.
I mean, Jordan, that's a pretty bold statement. Where does that certainty come from?
That certainty comes from my firsthand experience in what I term a psionic exploitation program between the years of 2005 and 2010, where I interfaced and worked with non-human intelligence and things like UAP directly.
I mean, Jordan, that is an incredible claim. For the viewer at home, what were you doing in this program on a daily basis?
Yeah, so this would look at like things that many people would consider woo-woo-y, right? Like astral projection or meditation. But ultimately, what we were really investigating was how far could we stretch the bounds of human consciousness. Beyond that, how could we get human consciousness to interface directly with things like recovered materials and recovered crafts? What I can tell you from the craft and some of the different projects that we worked on directly is ultimately that they interfaced with us. What I mean by that is my consciousness could project into these craft and recovered materials and then access a suite of commands, essentially capabilities to do various things, including piloting. But ultimately, the story is not about piloting some UAP with your mind. This story is much more about what is consciousness?
Yeah.
Why can we interface with these things?
Do you have material that supports these claims?
I have tons of material, linearly autobiographical records that will support my claims.
This guy that last year came out alongside Steve to talk about all of these things, and now we find out that he's part of Skywatcher. And what does Skywatcher talk about in their videos or in their messaging? Because they're not just trying to communicate with these objects. When Jake Barber came forward and talked about his experience, he described a very feminine energy. And then Chris Bledsoe has confirmed that this feminine energy is the same Hathor goddess that he has been dealing with. And he said also that he's really good friends with Jake Barber. So you guys see where I'm going with this, right? So apparently, and what it seems like is that Skywatcher, at least some of the people there, do seem to entertain this idea that the old gods may be coming back, or we're dealing with something along those lines. And I just don't know what to think about that, if I'm being completely honest with you. I grew up reading Greek mythology, Roman mythology. I've always been fascinated by all of that, but I don't know if that is actually happening or not. All I can tell you guys is that, yes, there is people within important positions in government, the military, the intelligence community, even Congress people, as Steve says here, who actually believe this is happening. So maybe we could get a little more information from them about it, because it can get really confusing to a lot of people. And Steve himself says that the entity that is talking to him is named Malachi, which I think it's a biblical name. I'm not sure. So I don't know. It really brings me back to this image that Tom DeLonge shared on his Monsters of California movie, where he says, and he kept saying alongside Mr. Peter Lavenda, that the old gods are essentially making a return.
Around the time of the ancient Greek civilization, these gods came in and they passed down a huge amount of knowledge. That's when we got the alphabet, and that's when we really got into all the mathematics and everything that we know that comes with the ancient Greek civilization. I put down a question where I said, it looks to me that these gods came down here and they tampered with the Sumerian civilization, and then they started fighting amongst themselves, and then mankind started to factionalize. Well, something happened with those gods fighting other gods, that we have all those ancient myths of Olympus and the Titans and all of that stuff. After that, it seems to me that the gods stuck around and they started playing up the different religions between mankind. So we can now be so entertained fighting each other that this intelligence can roam around the planet to do whatever else it is it's trying to do, whether it's trying to tamper with the DNA of mankind, or it's trying to figure out how to harness a human being's soul, whatever it might be after, I'm not totally sure. Everything in those early advisory group communications were fine, but when I touched on the idea of hybrids in the human soul is when all the communication stopped on that thread. So I have to look at that as something that I shouldn't have been going into at the time.
And you got to think about this. Before the Abrahamic religions were invented or created, there were polytheistic religions, and some of them were like, for example, the Greek mythology gods and the Roman gods and all of the Hindu gods. And when the Abrahamic religions were created, a lot of these gods kind of lost their identity because of these religions. They suddenly transform into myths. And in many cases, I think that some of the hierarchies that exist within the Abrahamic religions, and angels and different types of angels like principalities and all that stuff, I think that many of these so-called ancient gods were just renamed into these categories. And the Abrahamic religions just placed a single god at the very top, which is when religions became monotheistic. That's as far as I go with the lore. Back then, before these religions were created, the polytheistic religions and all the gods that were venerated back then did have some sort of massive influence in the people from the area. I know that this tradition of polytheistic religions also happened in my country, for example, with the Mesoamerican civilizations and all that. And they were also paying respect to multiple gods, not just one. So what does this all mean, I wonder? If you guys have any type of insight that you want to share, please leave it in the comments, because I really want to know your perspective about this. And I can't say that I'm not surprised when I saw Jordan and I realized that he was this Lightbringer guy. At least I can tell you that, yeah, those two guys, I don't know if they still are or were part of the US government. So whether their story is real or not, I don't know. Whether it's misinformation or not, I don't know. But it certainly is very, very interesting. I want to hear your thoughts. Who do you think this Congresswoman Aphrodite reincarnated is? I want to know, who's your best bet? What do you think about this? What do you think in general about the ancient gods? Is there any that jumps out to you instantly out of all the ones that existed? Do you think this is real? Do you think the phenomenon is just tricking people? Because that's also possible. I know that from reading the literature, if you go to Valet, if you go to Keel, if you go to Harper, those guys tell you very clearly that this phenomenon seems to have a knack for just messing with our perception, with human perception. And they can make us see whatever we want, whatever they want us to see. Is that happening? Let me know in the comments. But I was happy to talk about this topic because it's been a long time coming. And until I saw this correlation, I really didn't want to go too deep into it, because although it is an interesting story, It's just a story. But now that Jordan is public, maybe it's not that much of a story after all. I don't know. Check the links. Let me know what you think. This Twitter space was like 3 hours and 40 minutes or something like that. It's pretty long, but I think it's worth your while. After the 30th minute, that's when the real story from Steve begins. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you guys in the comments. If you like the content you see, I'm going to ask you to like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the bell icon so you can get notified when a new video drops. If you want to support the channel in any other way, I'm going to leave a few links in the description. You can become a member if you like. You can also follow us on the KGRA feeds. We are everywhere with a weekly show every Sunday. So that's it for me today on this video, but I will see you guys in the next one. Remember, stay curious, stay inquisitive. Bye-bye.